Hello there, and welcome to episode lucky number 13 of the From a Certain Point of View podcast. I'm Josh,
And I'm Adam.
and we're back once again to talk Star Wars news, reviews, and points of view. And Adam, what have you been up to this week in the world of Star Wars?
A little bit of this, a little bit of that, just kind of bouncing around. Watching some Clone Wars again, up through like the first third of season 5.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're moving along pretty good there with that.
yeah, and started reading Queen's Shadow, which is the Padme novel.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Finished up an audiobook listen of From a Certain Point of View, and I'm kind of doing all that for the blog, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I started up a new series on the blog about the canon novels, kind of catching up on those. So I've been working on that a good bit. What about you, Josh?
Let's see. This week, not a whole lot in Star Wars. I have been paying a lot of attention to all the news, the unofficial news, I guess, that's been going around on the internet this week about Star Wars, and I did watch a couple episodes of Clone Wars. I'm moving along at a slower pace as usual.
Okay.
I'm probably about I'm getting towards like the Mortis arc in season 3.
Okay.
So I got some Night Sister Dathomir stuff, which kind of connects nicely to Fallen Order.
Oh yeah,
and everything.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Yeah.
Seeing all that stuff. So yeah, but basically it's been Clone Wars and news and listening to some other podcasts and stuff that I like to listen to. I like to listen to the Resistance broadcast that Star Wars Newsnet kind of it puts that together.
Right.
And I listen to Force Center with Joseph Scrimshaw and Ken Knapsack. So I've been doing a little bit of that as well.
Cool. Yeah, I was listening to the Coffee with Kenobi is one of my main podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So I was listening to that this week as well with Dan Zayer, and give him a shout out because he's actually I talked with him I think 2 weeks ago, and then last week he launched a new kind of a consulting service, media service, and we've been talking to him and kind of help getting us on track, starting off a podcast and all that. So danzmedia.com, if anybody out there is starting up a blog or a podcast and needs some pointers and help, Dan Z is the guy to go to. Big thank you to him for helping with that. So
yeah, absolutely, a big thank you, and I think it's great to be a part of like the Star Wars community and to be able to kind of help each other out. And it's a great fandom that we're a part of. Sometimes it can be viewed as kind of a negative fandom, but I think there's a lot of
it's not
great things and positivity to be found. So
yeah, we talked about this on episode 2 or 3 or so. It's an overwhelmingly positive fan base.
Yeah, the majority is definitely
that a couple people give a bad rep to. So
definitely, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that when we come to our news segment. But
okay.
What were you going to say, Adam?
Oh no, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah. Well, can you tell us about what's coming up on this week's show?
Yeah, we've got probably a more news-heavy show this week than anything else. There's been a lot of stuff kind of popping up here and there. Like you said, some of it official, some of it not.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a healthy dose of news to talk about. Clone Wars trailer dropped, so we're going to be taking a close look at that, and that's going to be the reviews. We're going to kind of dive into that trailer a good bit. And then points of view, I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, but I think this is a good time to kind of take a breath, and we want to look at the Darksaber and what makes that such an interesting reveal for the Mandalorian. So we're going to kind of roll back the clock on that and take a look at, where the Darksaber has been and why it's so interesting to a lot of fans and how it got where it is now. So that is episode 13 in a nutshell. Are you ready to jump into it, Josh?
Yeah, let's dive into our news heavy segment for this week.
Well, you want the bad news or the really bad news?
Our first news topic this week is we talked about this a little bit before, but Project Luminous, some more little unofficial tidbits have been leaking out about that. And Jordan Mason, who is the editor-in-chief at Cinelinx and has also written for Star Wars and is a Star Wars artist for Topps Trading Cards, has been kind of leaking some details here and there, And one of the things that he said earlier this week was that, first of all, there's no tangible information on it. So once again, this is one of those unofficial things. And to keep this in mind, like even though this is unofficial, like first of all, this could be real, this could be not. But even if it is real, this stuff changes so often by the time it gets to us as consumers.
That's a good point.
That even if this is true, and I have no reason to not trust this, but even if it is true, this stuff changes all the time. So, but he says that the video game reports that we got earlier this month, and what those were was that there was a new Star Wars video game that was going to be a heavy part of Project Luminous, and also kind of kicking off that High Republic era movie saga trilogy, whatever they have in mind for that. That is actually real, and the timing is different reported. And we talked about this earlier because that was a little bit confusing. He says that is not the actual start of Project Luminous, but it is a real part of it. So, and we had talked about that because
part of it.
Yeah, remember we were a little bit confused because the timing, it was supposed to kick off this year, but then that video game wasn't supposed to come out until next year, and they had reported that was the start of Project Luminous, but he's saying that might not be the case, but the video game news does seem to be real, so.
Yeah.
Which is exciting. We were excited about that before, and...
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of exciting stuff about Project Luminous, if the rumors are true. I mean, at first, again, because... and Adam, you just kind of listened to, from a certain point of view, the book that was kind of like almost a retelling of A New Hope from different perspectives. And so I thought Project Luminous was going to be that, but with Empire Strikes Back, since it's like the 40-year anniversary of that. So I thought we were going to be getting, like, from a certain point of view, but Empire Strikes Back,
Yeah, right.
But it seems like it might be something totally different, and I think it's, first of all, exciting to hear that we're going to be getting another video game that could be set in that time period, which could be really cool. But I love the idea of this whole story being set like 300 to 400 years before the Skywalker saga, and while I don't want them to rely too heavily on characters that we're already familiar with, I think it would almost be a given that we would see Yoda in this. But I think it makes sense that one thing this article says is that the Jedi are kind of exploring the unknown regions of the galaxy, which would make sense if we think about the Rise of Skywalker and how the Jedi texts kind of had information about the unknown regions and Exegol and the Wayfinders and everything like that. So that could be really interesting. And I also love the idea that it could be a series of films that are connected in a similar way to the MCU and the Marvel universe. So I think that could be a really cool way to approach this, and hopefully it works.
Yeah, definitely. So, moving on, this was kind of the major topic of the week. The Kenobi series has gone through, I don't even know what to call it anymore. Like delays, maybe, but then some more details come out about that, and let's just go through it from beginning to end. So, on Thursday, the 23rd, it started coming out in the evening that the Kenobi series has been halted, not canceled, but halted. It was shortened from a 6-episode miniseries down to a 4-episode miniseries. This was kind of the interesting part. It says that 2 scripts are written. Lucasfilm is looking for a new writer. There's some of that is weird because, like we talked about, and we remember during D23 that Kathleen Kennedy had said that all the scripts were ready to go. But I guess some of that stuff just kind of goes back and forth and goes through rewrites, and now they say that there's 2 actually written, and they're looking for a new writer to finish it out. Ewan McGregor and Deborah Chow are both still attached to the series, and actors were screen testing with Ewan prior to the shutdown. Now, this went through all kinds of discussion on the internet,
and Ewan even spoke out about this himself as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to touch on here. Ewan kind of himself got out there and put out some fires, and he basically said that it's really not even delayed at even the release. It hasn't been pushed back. Just the filming has. Right. It was part of that makes sense because especially if you're cutting it down in length from, you're chopping a whole third of it off there. As far as the number of episodes, then that would make sense how you could push filming back and still make a projected release date. But basically he's saying it was supposed to start shooting in August, and now won't start shooting until January of 2021. Right. And he there's even a funny little video of him talking about it. I don't know if you saw this.
I didn't see the video, but I heard his quotes where it seemed like he's just trying to say, "Okay, guys, this isn't that big of a deal."
Right. And that's mainly what the video says. He says he kind of jokes and says it's been very dramatic what you see online. He says there's
it's not that dramatic.
He says there's all kinds of crap online about it, but he doesn't use that word. But in very Ewan fashion, he kind of got out there and put out a lot of the fears, put down a lot of the fears.
I'm glad he spoke out about this because, I mean, this is where the kind of, and I'm not saying it's Star Wars fans necessarily, but this is where some of that negative stuff can come in, where people try to drive a certain narrative, and as soon as something comes out, it just gets taken kind of out of proportion and everything. Yeah.
And that's not even, like you said, that's not even just Star Wars fans. That's just the internet in general now.
Right, exactly. So we have to be really careful, when we see things that aren't even officially released. It's not even official news, it's just kind of rumors and conjecture and everything that we can't it just goes back to that old adage. I guess it's an old adage that you can't believe everything that you see on the internet, but I mean, so there is some truth to this, but I mean, we even like in our last episode, we decided intentionally not to talk about
the cancellation stuff,
that it was completely canceled, because that was the first thing that came out about it. Was that it was like completely canceled. You and I just said, we're not even going to talk about this.
Right.
Because it's just ridiculous. And so now, they were saying it's like delayed indefinitely or whatever.
That was the initial kind of phrasing from some of these outlets, and
right. And
that wasn't the case at all. And
no. And again, it's just all to get clicks and everything. And it's unfortunate. Now, certainly there is some truth behind the fact that there's like a little bit of a delay. But it's just important not to jump the gun on these things. I think. But yeah, it was
personally,
interesting.
I'll take Ewan's word over anybody else's. Right. So I'll go with what he says.
Yeah, definitely. And there were a couple more interesting things about this too. The first thing is, like you mentioned at D23, Kathleen Kennedy seemed very confident in the scripts they had, and they were
And
ready to go.
right.
Um,
And I just want to
so
add that even Ewan is still very confident in these scripts because
yeah, yeah,
he said a few times the scripts are very good. They just want to make them better.
right,
Which
sure,
I can get behind that. So
yeah, make it
um,
the best you possibly can.
yeah, yeah,
Um, Another thing was Ewan said he hadn't heard or that the series was shortened by a couple episodes, right? That wasn't something that he was aware of.
okay,
Um, so I thought that was interesting too. So again, I don't think any of that's confirmed. We could still end up getting
that's
6
true.
episodes.
Yeah, that's
You know what
true.
I mean? So until it's official, it's not official.
Yeah,
I guess is what I'll say
very true.
about that. Um, any other thoughts that you had about this
No,
particular article?
no. I think we beat it to death.
All right, that's what we like to do.
Yeah.
Um, so moving on to our next article for this week comes from IGN, and
Yep.
it says the latest rumor indicates that a new Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic project is underway at EA and looks to, quote, integrate elements from the first 2 games in order to bring certain things into the current Star Wars canon. So Lucasfilm was obviously listening to our podcast when we talked about
100%.
our video games that we want to see, and I had mentioned, a reboot of or sort of an updated version of
Yeah.
Knights of the Old Republic. So it clearly they're listening to us, Adam.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
yeah. Or it was merely just an awesome coincidence. But
No.
but yeah, I mean, I obviously am super excited about this idea, but my question is this the Project Luminous video game, but it's going to kind of be similar to Knights of the Old Republic, but be like 300 to 400 years before instead of, is
Thousands,
this
yeah.
the same thing or is this different? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it could go either way.
Yeah, it could. Yeah.
I think one thing that people have to remember is that just, if this does end up being a reimagining, it doesn't mean that it has to take place around the same characters, around the same story, or even around the same time period as anything that happened in Legends.
Mm-hmm.
This is gonna be, if this happens, if this is real, and it actually makes it to our hands, it's gonna be a reimagining of that stuff. And like the article says, there'll be elements that are brought in, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to be the same as what we know before.
Right.
Very much the way the sequel trilogy worked, where there are elements of what came before, but it's a very different story. So it's something to keep in mind going forward. Is that just because this might be called Old Republic or whatever, it might even be called Knights of the High Republic.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
But I mean, and you think of Knights of the Old Republic, and you immediately think of things like Revan and stuff, and Malik and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those characters could still be very involved with this, even if it is a different time period. And
Yeah, they could still bring those characters in.
right?
Yeah.
And that means just in canon, they just lived during a different time period than they did in Legends, and that's the only
Right.
That's it's a very real possibility. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'm really hoping that this is the same video game that they're talking about with Project Luminous, because I think, and if they called it High Republic instead or something, I like the idea of all these different forms of medium, video games, comics, novels, films, all being tied together in this big universe. And
Yeah.
and I know I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It works so well for Marvel, and I think,
and it's worked well for Star Wars in the past too. I mean,
right, and I think that could work for Star Wars again.
Yeah, right.
So I would just love to see that connectivity, because a lot of people have complained about the fact that if you're somebody that's invested in the canon and the novels and the comics and everything, the current films we have, especially the Skywalker saga, there's not a lot of there's some connective tissue, but it's not as
Yeah.
connected as it could be. And sometimes it makes you feel like, oh, why am I reading all this stuff when it doesn't really matter in the films? So for them to do it this way and have it all be connected, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it would get a lot of fans on board.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm all for that.
Definitely. So moving on to our last article for this week, it also comes from IGN, and it is the fact that Colin Trevorrow confirmed that the Duel of the Fates script leak was real. So we had.
There's been I've seen all kinds of funny stuff on Twitter about this.
Yeah.
I remember I saw a picture of Colin Trevorrow with a fake mustache and a top hat, and that was the person that was leaking all this.
I fully believe that, and I was going to get into that.
Okay.
So yeah, I absolutely think it was him, but I'm going to explain why here in a second. But if we look at Colin Trevorrow's tweet, it says, there's images of concept art, and he says, yes, this is from Duel of the Fates, but I'd never kill R2. He just took a bad hit. Happens to all of us.
Yeah.
So I think he's kind of saying something within that tweet too, that he kind of took a bad hit, and I think what happened here is Colin Trevorrow is trying to save face, basically. In my opinion, and I could be wrong. Again, this is speculation, but it was in early December, I think, before The Rise of Skywalker came out, and we had Jason Ward, who runs Making Star Wars website, and he had released an article about what Trevorrow's script looked like and things that happened in it, and Colin Trevorrow kind of responded to that tweet, and he said, "Oh, that's rough." He's like, "I normally don't," and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, "Normally I don't comment on these sort of things, but none of this stuff happened in my script." And then, like, mysteriously, about a month later, Jason Ward releases another article saying that he got a chance to read the script and everything in some private room somewhere.
Right.
So I think that, Colin Trevorrow was like, here, let's set the record straight. Let's leak this out because this is what the script actually was. And so that's what I believe. That's purely speculation. I could be wrong, but just putting the pieces together, and Colin here is confirming that the leak was real. So
yeah,
I'm still happy with the version of Episode 9 that we got.
Yeah, very much so.
Over this, but that's kind of what I think happened.
Yeah, I could see that. I guess I really didn't follow this much this past week. I saw that stuff, but and like I said, I saw some of the funny stuff around it. But like, for me, it just doesn't matter anymore. Like for me, it's just a previous version of Episode 9 that we just didn't see, and it happens with every single movie. It happened with Star Wars in 1977. It happens every time since then. So for me, it's just a version that we didn't see. And this talk that they see about which was better. I mean, it's just a waste of time. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I think the most interesting part of it for me is not the script itself, but just how it happened, how it came out. I think that's, for me, that's the interesting part of it. Because, like you said, Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, is canon. And to me, that's part of the Star Wars history. Nothing else matters. That I accept that as the Star Wars history, basically, and canon and everything. So like you said, anything else was just, and there's a reason that they replaced him with J.J. Abrams,
It just wasn't the story that they were looking for, and that's,
right. And
there's nothing wrong with that from Lucasfilm's standpoint. There's nothing wrong with that from JJ's standpoint or Colin's standpoint. It's just wasn't the story they wanted to go with. So
yeah. And I think for me, if I sat down and I read JJ and Chris Terrio's script versus Colin Trevorrow's, I would have done the same thing. I would have chosen JJ Abrams' script.
Yeah, personally for me, I would have too.
Because I just thinking about the script, I think there's so many like interesting things that happen, and so many great things that happen in the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Some of them,
Yeah.
to me, not executed quite as well as maybe they could have been, but just the script itself. Like if I was just reading the script,
Mhm.
I was very like, oh, this is awesome. This is great stuff. So
Yeah. I
so,
would
yeah.
like to see the full uncut, unedited script at some point.
Yeah.
Just to see all these ideas fleshed out.
Definitely, that would be really cool to see.
I'm not doing the release the JJ cut. That's not what I'm saying.
No,
I'm just saying. I
no.
just
It
kind of
would
want
just
to
be
see.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know we'll get some of that in the novelization. But just to kind of see the full breadth of everything that they wanted to do, I think that would be really interesting.
Agreed. Well, that is, I believe, it for the news this week. Is that right?
Yeah, that's all we got.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the Clone Wars trailer in
I'm
our
so
review
excited.
segment. Yes.
Let's do it.
My disappointment in your performance cannot be overstated.
Okay, this week the Clone Wars Season 7 trailer dropped, and whoo boy, what a trailer, man.
It's epic.
Yeah. So we wanted to use this. We had this in the news, and then you had kind of thought about moving this to the reviews section, which makes sense because there's a lot to talk about in this.
We didn't really have anything else to review this week,
right.
so I thought we could definitely just review the trailer.
So it kind of gives us some room to breathe here in this trailer because there's a lot to talk about. I want to kind of go through this piece by piece, and we'll talk about it in general overall afterwards. But this is about a 2-minute trailer. It opens with a very Star Wars shot, kind of the pan down on a planet, and Maul in the background, saying that the galaxy will be remade, and you see a shot of looks like Bo-Katan, Kryze, I believe.
Yeah, that's got to be Bo-Katan looking. I'm guessing that's got to be like the siege of Mandalore or something like that.
And it says that the Jedi and the Republic will die. So over that we get some shots of clone troopers, and there's one with Obi-Wan and Mace Windu. They're facing down a legion of battle droids. So like I said, Maul says that the Jedi and the Republic will die, and you get this nice little shot of just close up on his eyes.
There's a lot of really cool action shots in this trailer too.
Overall, yeah, there's a lot of really cool action scenes. The very next scene, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit more afterwards, but the next scene is Obi-Wan around a table of holo projections. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. It kind of goes back and forth. So Mace Windu is there with Yoda. This is in the temple, and they're around a holo projection of. It looks like they're kind of planning out a battle here, or an attack. One of the very interesting things that you see here is that it looks like in the top right corner of that table is Caleb and his master, which Caleb would later be, Kanan. Yeah. So a little Rebels tie-in. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
Looking forward to seeing that.
But the audio here, and you did get a shot of Obi-Wan, but the audio here that's important, I think, is that Mace gives his sense of plot to destroy the Jedi.
Yeah, to me this is the most interesting part of the trailer, because there seems to be overlap with Episode 3.
And there's another scene that I think confirmed, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. But yeah, that's a line from Episode 3, like straight from the movie.
Right. So this season could kind of take place. Some of it could take place at the same time as the events of Revenge of the Sith, which is, I think, really exciting and really interesting. And I'm excited to see how that's going to play out. Maybe we see something else that's going on at the same time as the events of Revenge of the Sith are unfolding.
Right. And like I said, there's another scene that I want to talk about later that kind of deals with that same idea.
Mm-hmm. And for me, like when we had Rebels, I really want, and we didn't really get this necessarily. I wanted to see Rebels like lead right into like the Battle of Scarif and and having those characters involved with that battle above Scarif in space, and we really didn't get that. But it seems like with Clone Wars in this final season, we might get it leading right into the events of Revenge of the Sith, which I think is exciting.
Right. Next shot is Maul again with one of the clone troopers, and it kind of looks like I'm sorry, Jesse, actually. You can kind of see by the tattoo on his face that it looks like Jesse. And doing kind of a Kylo Ren force.
Right. Trying to like maybe pull some information out of his head.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
With Jesse, resisting. Get a little Yoda shot, with him saying, "Great care we must take,"
which is also something he says in Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get an action shot with Ahsoka. She's on a speeder bike, racing across what looks like Coruscant.
Yeah, definitely Coruscant. I'm thinking.
Right. And I'm not quite sure who she's with there, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not sure who that is.
And I have to go back and watch season 7. I'm not sure if that's a character that's been introduced yet or not.
It could be a new character.
I'm leaning towards a new character. But she asked why anyone would walk away from being a Jedi, and we get a shot of her, walking away from Anakin after she does leave the Jedi Order.
Yeah, I think that could be a big part of her kind of storyline in this season.
Yeah, definitely. And then we get some Ahsoka dialogue, which I think is important for her motivations and what she's done. She says that they're supposed to be keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
Mm-hmm. And I think that Mace Windu said that, I think, right?
Right.
In Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. And then we also get some interesting dialogue again this time from Rex. And he says that the Clone Wars have mixed feelings about the war.
Mm-hmm.
He says without it, they wouldn't exist. It gave them life. And he doesn't really finish that thought, but the other part of that thought is that it's the thing that gave them life, but it's also the thing that gives them death.
Right, and the fact that they, with Order 66, turn on the Jedi, who they've grown very close with, and I love the humanity that this show gives to the clones, because in the movies we don't see a lot of that, and I think this show just shows us the human side of the clones, and that they each have their own personalities, and
you really grow you really grow to appreciate all these different clones and all these different characters and how very different they are, even coming from the same person. How they all grow to kind of develop their own personalities and their own character traits and their own flaws and strengths and all this other stuff. Even you go back to the very early episodes of the series where Yoda is speaking with them in a cave, and how he talks about how they're all very different presences within the Force.
Definitely.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that was my favorite line from the trailer for sure. Just that the contemplative nature of that line of, without the war we wouldn't have existed, but with it, it's what has it turned us into, or what have we become almost? Mm-hmm.
So we get some more Maul dialogue after this. He says everything. This is all part of the plan. The plan, and everything is about to change.
Yeah. Now, so he kind of. I'm guessing he's referencing Palpatine's plan.
I would imagine. Because he would know about this.
He would know about it. Yeah, I'm sure he would know about it back from the events of the Phantom Menace and everything.
Sure.
So Yeah, I think if this trailer is any indication, I think Maul's presence in this final season is going to be a very large presence. It seems
Right.
so.
And again, some more montages of some really cool action scenes. Some with Ahsoka with a speeder bike, and some Clone Wars action, some Anakin action, lightsaber. But then I want to talk about this scene because this is kind of one of those scenes that I think ties in again with Revenge of the Sith.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the scene with Anakin and the holo projection of Padme.
Yep.
Where they kind of touch hands.
Mm-hmm.
But she's also holding her stomach.
Right. She's clearly pregnant, and Anakin didn't discover that she was pregnant until the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, correct?
Right.
So
you would think that takes place after what happened there.
Yeah, it has to.
But
I don't think Dave Filoni would make that mistake. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it certainly indicates that this season will kind of overlap with Revenge of the Sith, because we don't really know how much time passes throughout the events of Revenge of the Sith. It could have been
right.
Could have been a few months. Who knows? You know what I mean? So
yeah, and then Maul kind of picks up his dialogue from before there, and he says that every choice made has led to this, and him and Ahsoka are in a chamber of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of getting ready to face off. Ahsoka with dual blue sabers here, which is interesting to me because she's had green before.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet that she has the dual sabers going.
Yeah, so she's always had she's had the dual green before, but she's never had dual blue that I can remember. So something happens here. Do you think that
this is a palace on Mandalore that they're confronting each other in?
Could be.
It looks familiar to me, from some of the Clone Wars episodes on Mandalore. Yeah. But so I'm wondering if obviously we don't see Ahsoka in the events of Revenge of the Sith, so I wonder if she's more part of the events that happen on Mandalore simultaneously while the events of Episode 3 are taking place with our main characters, like Anakin and Obi-Wan and everything.
Right. So after that, we basically get a couple more montage scenes of action sequences and things of that nature, and then we get our official date, the 21st, which was kind of talked about before, but now it's out there officially. So less than a month. You've got less than a month to wrap up 3 seasons, Josh.
Oh, I mean, this trailer though just got me so excited to do it. Like, I really want to dive in and watch 3 episodes a day or something for the next month. But this just got me super excited. I mean, this is, I don't know, it might be the best trailer for an animated show that I've ever seen.
Could be.
It's just awesome.
I still remember seeing Thrawn in the Rebels trailer, and how that blew my mind.
That was pretty good. Good.
This ranks up there easily. This trailer is just, I can't say enough about it. I love this trailer.
It's fantastic.
I love the Clone Wars as a series. It's even slightly above Rebels for me still.
I think it's possible that by the time I reach the end of it, it could be right up there for me too.
Yeah.
And I love that Dave Filoni is given the opportunity to finish what he started.
Yeah.
And finish the Clone Wars in the way that he wanted to finish it and lead it right into Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. It's very exciting, and I think what's also interesting is we could learn things in this final season that even tie into the Mandalorian.
For sure.
With the Darksaber, possibly, maybe we learn how Bo-Katan loses the Darksaber.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know when that happened in the timeline.
But maybe get to see Moff Gideon.
Maybe it's possible. And also just what happened to Mandalore
before he was a Moff.
Yeah. So we know we get some Mandalore stuff though in Rebels.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember who had because actually now that I think about it,
well, how about we save that for? Are you asking about Darksaber?
Yeah. So this is going to
talk about that. How about we just kind of move into?
This is going to transition nicely into our segment on the Darksaber and our points of view. So why don't you hit the cue and then we'll just dive right into that.
All right, we'll just jump in. Yeah.
Okay.
find that many of the truths we cling to depend greatly on our own point of view.
Okay, so Darksaber. Darksaber kind of came back into our fandom consciousness again with the 8th episode of The Mandalorian, where we see that Moff Gideon now owns the Darksaber. That's what he uses to cut himself out of the wreckage of the TIE fighter.
That was a very unexpected reveal. I was very surprised by that.
Very unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we talked about it back then that, when you start dealing so closely with Mandalore and Mandalorians, that you always kind of wonder if you could maybe see something like that. And I think that I was maybe like expecting like a glimpse of it somewhere. Like maybe it was laying on a mantle somewhere, that type of thing. You could just kind of see where it ended up. But then to see it in action, like live action, is just blew me away.
That was cool seeing something that's been animated become live action. And I was expecting to see maybe a character, that we've seen before, not necessarily the Darksaber, but seeing like a character, like a Ahsoka or Sabine or Bo-Katan or somebody like that,
Right.
But I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. So so the reason why I kind of want to talk about this, and if you're listening and you're not quite as familiar with the Darksaber, or maybe haven't watched all the animated series, you might not you might not share in the excitement that everyone else that has seen and read and done all this other stuff. You just might not be that quite as, or you might not get the excitement around this, So I kind of want to take a step back now that we're a little bit removed from The Mandalorian and we have some time to kind of dive deep into these topics. And I wanted to look at the Darksaber first, just because, it's kind of front and center with The Mandalorian right now. So what we want to talk about here is I want to talk about, first of all, kind of a history of the Darksaber, how it kind of came to be, where it's been, what makes it different, and why this is so exciting. So let's go all the way back to, and I believe that this was talked about in Rebels, kind of where the Darksaber kind of got its start. It was created by Tari Vizsla, who was actually the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order, and this was way back. This is over 1,000 years before the events of Episode 4, A New Hope.
Right.
So this one goes, way back in time. We're talking Old Republic here. So, after Vizsla's passing, and that name Vizsla is going to keep coming up around this Darksaber. So,
yes, that family is heavily involved with the Darksaber.
Yeah, very much so. So after Vizsla dies, the Darksaber is kept in the Jedi Temple. But then during the fall of the Old Republic, members of House Vizsla or Clan Vizsla stole the Darksaber from the Jedi Temple during a conflict there. So pretty much after that, it has been passed down among members of House Vizsla for years, decades and generations. It stays with House Vizsla.
So at this point, we're kind of following the path of the Darksaber.
Right. Yeah. And it basically stays there up until this is 21 BBY. So if you're not familiar, BBY stands for Before the Battle of Yavin. The Battle of Yavin is where the first Death Star was blown up. So basically Episode 4. So this is 21 years before Episode 4. It's still in the possession of House Vizsla, but it's now owned by Pre Vizsla, who is the leader of Death Watch and also the leader of that house, of that family. And this is kind of where we start seeing some segments of Mandalorian culture are kind of broken up this way. And I think that's still going to come into play later on, especially in Mandalore, the Mandalorian. Where that's still kind of an idea that's held on to with different clans and different houses and things like that. Pre-Vizsla uses the Darksaber, and he actually leads a successful takeover of Mandalore. And then after that, Darth Maul. Actually, this is so that we're getting into the Clone Wars era TV shows here.
Mm-hmm.
Darth Maul kills Vizsla and takes the Darksaber as his own. This kind of is important because it lends. It kind of introduces you to this Mandalorian idea that the Darksaber doesn't actually truly change ownership until a new wielder bests the old wielder in combat. So Darth Maul becomes the true owner of the Darksaber after he kills Pre-Vizsla. So Maul at that point takes Vizsla's place as the leader of Death Watch, and Maul basically keeps the Darksaber for a long time after that. He continues to use it in several episodes of Clone Wars, in several different battles, and he actually uses it to kill Satine right in front of Obi-Wan. That's kind of one of his vengeful tactics against Obi-Wan, is to kill Satine. And Satine is kind of Obi-Wan's, love interest, really, for lack of a better word. That's always one of the interesting aspects of Clone Wars, is to see that Anakin's not the only one that deals with those types of feelings. And
Obi-Wan did as well.
talks about it too, and that Jedi still have those feelings, but it's a matter of balancing out those feelings.
Right.
So Maul basically keeps this the Darksaber, and it ends up on Dathomir in the Dark Sisters in the Night Sisters lair. And it stays there up until we go back to Rebels now. This is during the time of the Empire. Sabine Wren, one of the main characters of Rebels, basically gets the Darksaber from Dathomir within that Night Sisters lair, and there's a whole arc where she's possessed by a Night Sister spirit, and Ezra has to break the altar where the Darksaber was kept to kind of break that hold on Sabine. And after that, the Darksaber ends up in the hands of Sabine for a little bit. She begins to train Kanan Jarrus begins to train her to use the Darksaber at that point. And Sabine ends up taking it to her family. They travel to her family to try to find some additional support for their fight against the Empire. Sabine becomes the rightful wielder of the Darksaber after she defeats Gar Saxon, which is a governor of Mandalore at that time. She defeats him in battle, and that's actually when she becomes the rightful owner of the Darksaber.
That's actually like Sabine's arc with the Darksaber and her training and everything. That's one of my favorite character arcs in Rebels.
It's really well done.
It's really well done.
Those episodes as a whole are just really quality episodes. So we're actually really getting close to bringing us current here. But after that, Sabine actually hands the Darksaber over to Bo-Katan Kryze, which is Satine Kryze's sister. She hands that over to Bo-Katan for her to lead the Mandalorians in the fight against the Empire. And that's really where we know for sure that it stays until we see it again in The Mandalorian with Moff Gideon. So
that brings us up to The Mandalorian and the last time we've seen it.
Yeah, so that's trying to do some quick math in my head, but Mandalorian is 9 ABY. And I want to say, so that's probably about 12 years. of time, give or take.
Probably. Mm-hmm.
So it's probably about it's probably about 12 years of time in between when Bo-Katan has it and we see it again with Moff Gideon.
Yeah. So now that I think about it, I guess what we don't know is, how did it go from Bo-Katan to Moff Gideon, and maybe that's
right.
something we'll learn in the Mandalorian. But now that I think about the timeline and everything, we're obviously not going to get that answer in the Clone Wars.
I don't know. I mean,
just because we see the events of Rebels that take place after the Clone Wars and where the Darksaber is and everything.
Yeah.
So now I think about it.
I guess you are right about that.
Right.
So the Darksaber, though, we haven't really talked about like what it is. So that's kind of the history of it. The Darksaber is actually the only one that we know of. It's a black bladed lightsaber.
Yeah, it's very unique.
Yeah, very different. It's a black blade with a white kind of like electrical outline type thing. And
it's very different as a kind of a lightsaber.
Right. It's shorter than most lightsabers, and it's actually shaped like a sword.
It's
not like the rounded.
Sword,
it's not like the round. The straight edge with like the rounded tip.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a sword. It looks like a blade.
Which makes me wonder. With some of the stuff that we could be getting in the High Republic era, if that's true. Could we see some different styles of lightsabers maybe? And I don't want them to go too far with it or anything, but it could be interesting to see some different types of lightsabers, different lightsaber colors, stuff like that. I think that could be pretty interesting.
Yep. It also, the crystal that powers the blade also served as a conduit for force energy. Which basically means that the wielder's thoughts and actions can kind of guide the blade itself. So you see that when it's in the hands of someone who's a little more unstable, a little more kind of like Maul, where it becomes a little less. What do I want to say? It becomes a little more erratic in its power, I guess. You kind of see some more electricity flying around it. You kind of see it's not quite as solid as it is in other hands.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's also capable of parrying lightsaber blades, which we see a number of times, because it's in a number of different battles. But it's also interesting because it says that they're actually drawn towards each other, almost like a magnetic pull.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so it's almost kind of like they're a little bit like opposites, if you described it like if you described it magnetically, where they're being attracted towards each other.
Yeah.
Right. So a very different looking lightsaber, and one that we've not seen in any other fashion at all. Period. We've never seen that color in a different blade. Very much like you just don't see purple very often, but black is the only time you see black. So it's a very different looking lightsaber with some different ideas behind it.
And it has quite a history behind it as well,
And also as I was reading about this, when the idea for this kind of first came up in the Clone Wars, Pre Vizsla was supposed to have a vibroblade, which is something we've seen before, and even in the Mandalorian, he has that vibroblade dagger. But George Lucas himself actually wanted something a little bit different, and that's kind of where they went back to the drawing board with this and came up with this lightsaber, this Darksaber, with a black blade. So this is a very unique lightsaber. It's something that we don't see, like I said before, very often at all. And to have this kind of come up out of nowhere in the Mandalorian was that's kind of where a lot of the excitement comes from. You know, it's just it's a rare thing in Star Wars. It doesn't you don't see it very often, and it's a rare thing in Star Wars that we've only seen in animation before, and it's some comics and things like that. But we've only seen it in that fashion, and now that we've seen it in live action,
now it's made its way into live action stuff. So
it's really cool to see in with real tangible characters around it. You know,
definitely. Well, Adam, thank you for taking us through the journey of the Darksaber and where it's been throughout the years. So it was definitely some interesting stuff, and I'm looking forward to filling the gaps between how it got into Moff Gideon's hands and where it goes from there.
Yep, for sure, definitely.
So, Adam, do you want to wrap things up for us for this week?
Yeah, let's head into the wrap-up segment.
I'm just glad you're here. At the end.
Thank you again for joining us for the podcast. We've had a blast talking about all kinds of news and Clone Wars and Darksaber and Rebels and just a whole bunch of fun Star Wars discussion this week. Really encompassing a whole lot of different aspects of Star Wars. So it's been a ton of fun. Remember to, if you're listening to this, to subscribe to us on your favorite podcatcher. We're on a number of different ones, and if by any chance we're not in the one that you use, let us know. We can look into adding it. And if you are listening to us on iTunes, please leave us a review. That actually really does help a lot. And if you want to be super helpful and you don't listen on iTunes, but you have a Windows computer, you can download iTunes and still review us on iTunes. So it really helps us kind of get the show out there so that more people can see it and be a part of it. Remember to check out the website from a certain point of view.com. We've got a couple new blog posts up there, and I'm working on a new one for Monday. Continuing the canon catch-up series. We'll be looking at kind of a meta. It's kind of a meta week this week because we're looking at From a Certain Point of View, which is the short story collection that also shares its name with our podcast. So,
yes, indeed.
And of course, check out the socials. Twitter is at Certain POV Pod. Facebook page is From a Certain Point of View. The Discord server, the link for that will be in the show notes. And our email is certainpovpod@gmail.com. And with that, Josh has a new idea that we want to kick off this week. So I'm going to kick it over to Josh.
Okay, so we have something new for you guys this week, and we're going to do a little bit of Star Wars trivia. So I have 3 questions that I'm going to be asking. The first 2, Adam and I will answer, and the third one, I'm going to put it up to you guys to answer this one, and we'll have it out on Facebook and Twitter, and so that you can answer the final trivia question. The first question is, which 3 movies end with limb replacement surgery?
Limb replacement
so Adam, do you want to take a second to think about that and see if you have an answer?
Empire, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah, so I was thinking of the same 3. So with Empire, of course, we have Luke's hand being replaced.
Right.
Attack of the Clones, it's Anakin's
arm
that Dooku cut off. And then, obviously, Revenge of the Sith, we have the limbs that Anakin lost to Obi-Wan. And that is the correct answer. The Empire Strikes Back, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. Our second question is, who tells Chancellor Palpatine, in the name of the Galactic Senate of the Republic, you're under arrest?
Mace.
Mace Windu, indeed. So the third question that I'm going to pose
to the Senate.
Yes, not yet. So the question I'm going to pose to our audience is, this is a pretty interesting question, and it's a little difficult, but I think you can get it. Which Jedi in the Geonosian arena uses the Force to incapacitate the battle droid with C-3PO's head? So
Okay.
that is the question I'm posing to our audience, and that will be
And
out
if you
there
need to
on
research, that's Attack of the Clones.
Yes, it's an
So,
Attack of the Clones.
yeah.
So thank you guys once again for listening to our podcast and hopefully participating in it. We always want you to be an active part of our podcast. So respond to our trivia question. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer, or ideas about topics we can talk about, please submit them on our various social media. And even the email address as well. So,
Yeah.
Adam, anything else to add to the end of our show?
No, I'll just echo what you said. Like, I hope you guys can reach out, and like we've said before, if you have any ideas, any questions, any ideas for show segments, if you want to be on the show, just reach out and let us know. We'd love to have you.
All right, everybody, and until next time, remember, the Force will be with you.
Always.